So thank you so much, everybody who's here tonight joining us for the first Queen Quick Chats. I was hoping to just have 15 minutes of your time to talk through some of the issues related to Black maternal health. This is the third year that Black Mamas Matter, which is a nonprofit organization, is celebrating and bringing to light the different issues related to Black maternity or maternal health. And so this year's theme is centering Black mamas, our, what is it, the right to live and thrive. And so our first conversation today, I thought would be really great to have you, Shaytara, and everybody who's here. Shaytara is doula to the queen. That's me. And founder of the Birth Co. in Massachusetts. So if you don't, if you want to add some more things, Shay, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do. And what's a doula? First question.
What is it? I mean, I think when people think about a doula, they automatically think of a midwife, and they think that I deliver babies, but I don't deliver babies. So the easiest way to put it is like I'm a labor coach, right? So I'm there to support women physically and mentally throughout the birthing process, but I'm not actually there catching the little baby when they come out.
Got it. So what do you do in your practice? How, right now, are you doing virtual aspects?
Yeah.
Is that part of the work that you're doing? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so I'm both a birth and postpartum doula, but since all of this mess has happened, all of my work has transitioned over to virtual care. So for postpartum, that's a little bit hard because a lot of that work is hands-on. So a lot of that has stopped with like the overnight care and things like that. But for birthing people, the support is still there. It's just all virtual. So we can do things like this where it's Zoom, FaceTime, like Google Hangouts, text messaging, all of that good stuff while the parents are laboring inside the hospital.
Yeah.
But home birth, I will still be with you if you choose to have a home birth. Just
so
within
you'll
the
actually
hospital.
Travel to your client.
Right. And I can still labor with them at home if that's what I encourage anyway, for you to labor at home as long as you can and really get to the hospital once you're in active labor. So you're just like at that pushing stage. So that's what I encourage anyway. So that part hasn't changed.
Got it. So you're talking to a pro, right? I have had 2 kids. I think I'm a pro now, but
you are.
Thank you. Could you take us from the beginning to the end with the lens of COVID? So, okay, which in my case, my water broke and I did not have contractions this time, but those different things that would happen, right? Those different signs. Now, what do I do? And what precautions do I need to be taking?
So I think for now, at least in my experience and what is going on with my clients, is that the fear is heightened, right? So you already have a fear of the unknown when you're having a baby anyway. So you already have that anxiety. So now, since I'm not able to be there with them physically, there's a lot more fear. So there's a lot more work surrounded on getting them mentally grounded to be able to be able to handle everything that they were expecting me to handle, if that makes sense. So like all of the hands-on stuff that I do, coping mechanisms that I do for when you're having contractions, whether I'm doing a hip squeeze or massage, all those things I'm not there to do. So I'm kind of coaching their partner to do that with them, where the partner, is already kind of nervous and afraid that they're not able to do that just because it's just not their skill set. So there's a lot more preparation. So in those prenatal visits where it's, a lot of that childbirth ed and then the comfort measures after that, it's kind of like a lot more, like a lot more, a lot more phone calls, a lot more FaceTime, just to get them comfortable to be able to do this themselves. Because everyone can do it themselves. They just need to be able to trust themselves and feel empowered enough to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Along with the right skills, right?
Yeah, of course. Which is what you go through, definitely. That was my
Right,
experience during our prenatal, going through what the different options are, what to expect, when to
right,
call you. Um,
right.
so let's say I've gone through, like I'm experiencing everything that we've talked about, right? Let's say, for instance, what happened to me, my water broke. I called you first, and then you told
Yeah.
me to call my provider at the
Hmm.
hospital and to labor until contractions got to a certain speed. And right, you can talk about a little bit more about that. But let's say all of
Yeah.
that's happened, and now I've determined that I need to head to the hospital.
Yeah.
What what do I do? I think that's where the anxiety for a lot of women is right now.
Yeah.
So what do you do at that point?
So as far as policies, hospital wise, you want to check, you're going to call triage anyway, right? You're going to call that number that they tell you to call to verify if you are actually in labor. The questions that you need to ask are, where do I go? Because that entrance that you're used to going to may be closed.
Right.
So you need to find out what entrance you need to go into to get to registration and check in for labor and delivery. Bring everything out of your car. You cannot leave. So your partner cannot leave. Once your partner leaves your labor and delivery room, they're not allowed back in. So
Yeah.
everything you need, except for your car seat. So you don't need the car seat, but no valet parking. Um, Make sure you have lots of snacks, food
Yep.
in your bags. The regular things that we tell you to have, but that you may be a little more lax with because you're like, oh, I can just run to the vending machine or I can just run, to the cafeteria and get it. All of that has changed. Think of it as like everything is on lockdown and you're in your room. That's it, right? You don't necessarily have to bring your own mask. You could. Um, I was just at Newton Wellesley recently, and they were giving everyone a mask that came in. I
Yep.
don't know if it's like that for every hospital, um, but just know that like you're locked in that space. And like I tell all of my clients anyway, that room is yours. You paid for it, so utilize it to the max. However you want, you can dim the lights. You can, whatever you want to do in there, do it. Some
Yep.
things they may not allow now just because of COVID-19. Like if one pain management option is the nitrous oxide, that's no longer being used. Um,
Really?
yeah, so that's no longer being used.
Okay.
You probably won't be able to bring your own nightgown like I encourage my
Yep.
clients to do. Um, so there's a lot of those little nuances that may be taken away. But you also have to remember that you still have rights, right? So no matter that this is going on and there are some policies that are in place for your safety, that doesn't negate what your rights are. And you need
Yep.
to know those ahead of time. And policies are changing day by day, hour by hour. So you really should be checking in with the hospital that you plan to birth at to figure out what the policies are for that day, each day up until delivery, up until
Yep.
you start labor.
Yep. So you talked about, virtual doulaing, I guess, now maybe the
Yep,
term, um,
I know.
which, right. But can you tell me a little bit why, kind of like make the case, in addition to, I think, why having a doula specifically for Black women
Yep.
who are pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
but what is the case now that we're in this pandemic? Why is it so important to have a doula on your team?
It's just so you know what you need to know, right?
Yeah,
Um, because we can't, I mean, the reality is you can't have blind trust. You just can't have blind trust in your providers that they're going to tell you all the information that you need in order to make informed decisions, because that just doesn't happen. If it did, we wouldn't have the mortality rates that we have across the board, right?
right.
So you're going to get information that's catered to you. Like, you're not just in this box when you're working with your doula or anyone that's in the birthing space. They're really looking at you as an individual and taking your history into account, all the things that you want for your birth, and then that's how we create the space that you want. And that's pretty much what it is. You're going to get the information that you need to be able to, especially now since we're not able to be there physically, you're
Right.
going to need an advocate, right?
Right.
And that's usually what your nurse should be, is a patient advocate, right? But you need an advocate on your side. So
Yeah.
that's why you still need someone that's a FaceTime away to say, hey, my doctor presented this with me. What do you think about this? Right? We're not medical professionals, but we know how to navigate the space. So if you have
Mm-hmm.
questions, you know that you're getting the answer for someone that's truly on your side and really has your best interest at heart. No, because we've spent a lot more time with you versus, a 10-15 minute prenatal where it's kind of checking if baby is okay. And just
Right.
like those vitals, right? And it's okay, pee in a cup. Let me see if you have some like, and then you're about your way versus like really looking at the inner person and, in a more holistic way.
Yeah. So we touched on home births just a little bit, but I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
ask you, so let's say I'm planning to have, you know, I'm planning to birth in a hospital, but
Yeah.
I'm reading and I'm kind of feeling anxious about that. So I've decided I want to explore
Yeah.
my other options. What are those? And at what point during my pregnancy do I need to make that decision?
Well, right now, from what in my experience, again, and all of the home birth midwives that I know, if they have availability, they will take you on. Right? If you're in labor, they will, they will take you on. Of
Yep.
course, they're going to do a history with you and make sure it's safe for you to birth at home, right? Home birth is safe. It's proven to be safer than a hospital birth, but there are some people that have some underlying health issues that make them like screen out of having a home birth. So if you have certain conditions, it's probably not safer for you to birth at home. So the
Okay.
best place is for you to be in a hospital. And they would go over that with you and let you know if it's safe or not for you.
Okay. And so home birth and then birthing centers.
Yep, birthing centers, a couple of them are actually closing. Um, so you would have to double check on that. A
Okay.
birthing center is really if you're looking for a natural birth because they don't have pain medication there.
Right.
So if you know that that's something that you prepared for and mentally that you want to take on a natural birth, then yeah, go ahead and birth at a birthing center. It's the closest that you'll get to a home birth
Got it.
outside of a hospital.
Yep. And are there any resources that you suggest? As you're talking, I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
even though, so I was preparing to do non-medicated birth, which didn't go that way for me, but I
Mm-hmm.
prepared by reading a hypnobirthing book. Are there other resources that someone who's pregnant and thinking about these different options
Yeah,
that they should consider?
definitely a childbirth ed class is like crucial, right? Because if you don't know, that's where that fear comes in. So we all need to have fear because that helps us to be cautious, right? But if fear takes over your body, those are the hormones that we don't want in labor, and it will halt
Yeah.
your labor, right? So it's all those stress hormones. Um, so a childbirth ed class is going to teach you what your body is physiologically doing so that you know what's going on. You know what that contraction is doing, right? So everything has a purpose. That pain has a purpose. And it's just perspective, right? So you're not like, I'm in a whole bunch of pain and like this is just torture. You know that
Right.
that contraction is bringing that baby down, right? So if you can just change your perspective and know what a physiological birth looks like, that prepares you, one, mentally, and then the
Right.
next thing is to prepare for the pain, right? So if you've had a baby before, you have a point of reference, right? So you know what that feels like, so then you can prepare for that pain in a different way. If you haven't had a child before, what you can think of is period cramps, right? So early labor really just feels like annoying period cramps, like on 10, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you can deal with that, you kind of have to get, I don't know how to really explain like active labor contractions. They're brutal. They're really, really brutal. So for some folks, hypno birthing works for them because
Yeah.
it's breathing techniques and it's getting you in another,
Visualization.
right. If that works for you, cool. Some people can have like a ritual that they do for each contraction, whether it's holding something, a picture of whatever, something that's important to you, and they just kind of zero in on that for each contraction. So they create a ritual for each contraction that helps them to get through. And this is what you would work on with your doula, all of the comfort measures to help you get through. Because all we do is like, nothing is going to take away the pain except for an epidural. That's it. An epidural is the only thing to take away pain. But there's lots of things like acupressure and different things like that that can help you to just redirect those pain signals so that you don't experience the pain at the intensity that you would without those measures.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I guess, and everyone who's on, please ask questions. You can write them in the comments or use this fancy like question thing that has popped up now on live recently. So please do that if you'd like. But I guess to kind of, encapsulate some of the things that you've mentioned so far, what are the sort of top tips that you think pregnant mothers, people are should think about as they are getting closer to their birthday?
Right. One, find a childbirth ed class. That's just key. And being part of that is just being informed. Lots of folks are doing free childbirth ed classes now, online classes. I myself am an instructor in a really cool app that you can download. It's called Soshi. That's SOSHE. So you can download that app. And our next class, we're already in a class right now. The next class is starting April 26th. So you can sign up for that. It's at an introductory price now of $49, but if you're in hardship, it's free. We don't ask any questions. You just sign up for the free link and you're good to go. Lots of doulas are doing virtual support. A lot of us are giving consults for free, just so you can get some information. So just reach out. There's breastfeeding support. I know next week Thursday, I think you're gonna have Kendra on, and she could talk about the breastfeeding stuff that's going on. We have a warm line for breastfeeding support since we can't meet with our groups anymore. So there's lots of stuff available. Just, you can reach out to me or, to Shannon, and we can get you some links to some resources.
Sounds good. Yes, I do think it'd be nice to follow up maybe with like a blog or something with some links. We definitely will. We can provide that definitely on our blogs, our respective blogs. Yeah. So I don't see that there are any questions, which is
I don't see either.
No.
I just see highs. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, this is awesome. Is there anything that you'd like to say to kind of leave us with, and thinking about, again, I guess, celebrating Black maternal health, this idea of centering Black mothers, I think COVID is almost like an additional anxiety point, right? So not only are you pregnant and worried about that, but then COVID, but then also all the stuff that we know about being a Black woman and birthing in our, in our embodiment, in our skin. So anything to kind of calm us down.
I would say, even though there's so much, it's a scary time. I'm not going to lie. How can I put this? Find some ways to ground yourself and center yourself. So whatever skills that you have on a normal day-to-day basis where you get stressed out, those skills are transferable. So whether, like, I don't know, reading a book, going for a walk, whatever those things are that you normally do to help calm yourself, you can do that in labor, right? So for now, like, you just have to figure out a way to know that you can still have the birth experience that you want. Everything doesn't have to be washed down the drain because your doula can't be there, or there's all this scary stuff going on in the hospital. You can still have the experience that you want because you still have rights, even within the hospital. So fight for your rights. Like I always say, like, providers, nurses, doctors, they come in for a shift. That's their shift. For a nurse, it's a 12-hour shift. For an OBGYN, it may be a 24-hour shift. This is your life. You get one chance at this birth. There's no do-overs. So if you have to ruffle a little bit of feathers and, you know, people think that, you know, you have an attitude, okay, have an attitude. Be that person if you need to be, because you want to have the birth experience that you want to have, right? So know that you have rights within a hospital. Know that you can say no. You don't have to consent to everything. Everything that's presented to you as policy is not law, right? Hospitals make policy. That doesn't mean you have to follow them. That's for the hospital to follow, not for you to follow. So yeah, just try to be as, I know it's easier said than done, but you can still have the birth experience that you want. Just try to figure out what team that you need to build to get the birth experience that you want.
Yep. And I will say, I will add, I think one
questions.
There are, while we're reading those, I will add too, I think what helped me a lot during my most recent experience was writing down my birth plan. It changed completely, as you know. A lot of the things on there did not happen, but it allowed me to think through what are the different options, which option would I choose first, and kind of just playing it out, right? Like going through every sort of step of the way and playing out the scenarios. So that was really, really helpful to me. So I would add that in your list.
Definitely. And right now in the childbirth ed course that I'm doing, we're on to role playing. So that's really great to do that, just so you know how to respond and not caught off guard. So like, oh, I've heard that already, right? So you've made a mental note of that, so you know how to respond when a nurse or a doctor is presenting with something that you don't want. Like you don't have to shrink and have like this fear that you don't want to say no because you're trying to please them.
Yeah. Someone just said, or it's Brittany, she just said she enjoyed the book Pushed by Jennifer Block. It gave an interesting perspective on the hospital policies. And I will say, having, so I've never read that book, so let's suggest that. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I also will say that my prenatal appointments with you and going through some of the things that I, you know, just the different processes, and then you showing me at every step, like, oh yeah, that's not something you actually have to do. You don't have to wear that gown, which now you're saying that you will, or you might have to. But there were these different points that I didn't even realize were actually choices. So it's definitely something to seek out as far as the information. And this book sounds like it's a good way to find those different things out. In addition, of course, to having a doula, which you should. So one of the questions, there was one, what advice do you have for young women who are not sure if they want a baby, but wants info giving the mortality rates?
So the decision to have a baby should not be based on the mortality rates. Simple answer. If you want to have, build your family, and you also build a team so that you don't become a part of those stats. So when we look at those numbers, right, and we dissect them further, it's pretty sad the reason that these women and these babies are dying, and they're all preventable causes, right? So if you have a team, even if you can't afford a doula, right, you can have a consult with a doula. You can pay them hourly to build a birth plan or get information. So there's a way. So we always plan for a baby shower and we go all out and we do these gender reveals, like redirect that money and those resources to what's really important and that's more impactful on your parenting journey. So have those babies. We love babies. Have them if you want them.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
There's experts there so that you don't become a part of those stats, right? And that's why we have Black doulas. That's why we have Black midwives. That's why we have Black breastfeeding counselors, and like it's the whole, team. That's why within myself, I don't just do doula work. Like everything around parenthood, I do. If you want some
Yep.
infant sleep information, if you want breastfeeding information, like all of those things, you can get encompassed in me. So there's teams out there.
Awesome. Awesome. Someone says, as a doula, can you talk a little bit more about the importance of postpartum care, especially for Black women?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, postpartum care for Black women is crucial. I think a part of it is a lot of the ideologies that we have need to be erased, unlearned, and we need to learn some new habits, for lack of a better word. Some of the stuff is like out of your control, right? So if you go home and you're experiencing a headache, or you're showing signs of eclampsia or preeclampsia post birth, so you can still experience preeclampsia after birth. So if you're experiencing these things and you call your provider, you're like, hey, I have a headache, or I'm having some back pain, or whatever the case may be, and they dismiss you as, oh, that's just pregnancy related, right? You just had a baby. Of course, you're going to feel kind of wacky. That's why we're dying, because we're not being listened to. So no, you're not going to sit in an emergency. If you're sitting in an emergency room, just like the woman in Rhode Island, where she sat in the emergency room and she died,
Yep.
get up and go somewhere else, right? If someone's not listening to you, go somewhere else, please, 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 please. Call someone. I don't care. Call a friend, call your mother, call someone and say, this is happening to me, because they may know something or know someone that can help you, right?
Yeah.
So we have to start looking at our bodies, right? You've just had a baby, right? So your uterus expanded and you grew a new organ, which is a placenta. And so that placenta is like the size of a plate, and that has detached from your uterus, right? So all of those blood vessels have to close off and contract and shrink back down to normal, right? So think of it as it's an open wound pretty much, right? If you had a big gash on your arm, you would probably be a little bit more careful and do as directed to take care of that wound. But because we can't see the inside, we just go about our business. We're like, oh, you get home and you're like, oh, I feel good, right? My bleeding is kind of normal and I feel good. So then we get up, we start cleaning, we start doing dishes, we start doing all these things when your body needs to heal.
Yeah.
Right. So you need to be home healing. You need to warm your body, cover up, eat soup, like all of these African traditions that we know of, we don't do. That's how you need to take care of yourself postpartum. You need to be bonding with your baby. If you're choosing to breastfeed your baby needs to be with you at all times. So all of these things, again, it's just like we do a birth plan, we have a postpartum plan. What are we going to do postpartum? And again, building your postpartum team too. Who can I call if I have questions? Who can I call if I just feel kind of funny and something's just off? I need to not dismiss that. Never dismiss your intuition. Always follow.
Mm-hmm. So, and I think that goes back to why it's important to have a doula as part of your postpartum team. It's someone who, as you mentioned, even has hopefully a longer relationship with you than maybe your OB or your midwife even, right? Because you're having more in-depth conversations. So when you do alert this person to something feeling off or wrong, they have a better idea of what could be going on, and then also advise you on what next steps to take. I think that's so important, in particular for Black women. And when we know, we read about how our pain thresholds aren't taken seriously, and just all these different things, to have someone else on your side to kind of verify, yes, this is happening, and yes, this is something that you need to be seen about. So that's definitely why having a doula as part of your postpartum team for a Black woman is very, very important. Yeah.
And they're going to ask follow-up questions too. Go ahead.
Sorry. What do you do if you feel like you aren't being heard is a question we got.
So you keep talking.
We kind of touched on it. Yeah.
You have to keep, if don't be, this goes on too, if you say you have an OB, right? You have an OB, you're under an OB's care, and they're dismissive of you in your prenatal appointments, and you kind of feel like, oh, that's the doctor, right? And that's my doctor. You can fire your doctor. You can fire your doctor and get another one.
Which makes me
And
so nervous, but you're right. You're right.
don't be nervous,
Yeah.
right? Because if they're dismissive to you during your prenatal care, how is it going to be when you go to give birth? Yeah. Right? So you may not get that provider because they're all on a shared call schedule, but within that practice, do they all have the same philosophies? So if you switch from that doctor to this doctor, and they're all kind of the same, they're all kind of dismissive and just, I know best, that's probably not the practice for you. Yeah. This is the mecca of healthcare, right? Yeah. So you have choices. So you can fire your doctor. If you're giving birth, if you're at a hospital and you're in labor and you don't like that doctor, guess what? You can fire them and say, I need another doctor here, right? If your nurse has an attitude problem, ask for the charge nurse. I need another nurse, please. So these are all the things that women don't know that they can do and they have the right to do. You don't have to be dismissed. Keep going until you find someone who listens to you, and bring someone with you that can be your extra voice. And not only your extra voice, but someone that's a witness to this behavior. Someone that can hold them accountable so it's not your word against theirs. Yeah. Now, I have a witness here that heard you say such and such, right? And everything should be in your medical records, right? So if you're within the partner's healthcare system, you can go in and look at your notes, right? For every time that you've seen your doctor, make sure everything that you discussed is in there. Everything should be in there because that holds your provider accountable. So they can say, no, you didn't tell me that. Or you didn't request that test or whatever. All of that should be in there so that you're protected. You're protecting yourself if things go awry. Yeah.
And that would work virtually too, right?
Oh yeah.
Having somebody on FaceTime, I don't know how it's working now, but I would assume that you could also bring in this third party even if you had to do that virtually.
Oh yeah. So I think that they're kind of loosening some of the HIPAA laws because of everything that's going on.
Okay.
So yeah.
Someone was asking about bias in regards to, our providers of color, maybe more understanding of patients of color. And I don't know if you want to answer that question. I say, just from other experiences in life, we talk about policing, which is a whole other issue, but I think we all kind of breathe the same smoke. And if you're trained up a certain way, I think sometimes you can fall within the same bias. But I don't know if you have specific experience or want to take that question directly.
Right. I mean, I agree with you, right? So in general, you would think if you see another Black person, like we can relate because we have that shared experience. So you think you can let your guard down a little bit.
Right.
That's not always the case. Just because they just become conditioned as with everyone else, right? And especially if you're working within a system that's already so oppressive. I mean, what can you do, right? So I have this conversation with my clients as well, is that we have to have a little bit of empathy for providers and nurses because that whole system is it's horrible. I mean, it's just horrible, right? There's a lot of horizontal violence going on with nurses. Like it's a harsh system to be in, and these providers see trauma every day. Imagine seeing babies die. Imagine seeing women die. That's traumatic. Right. And you're seeing that over and over again. And so it's no wonder that they become hardened and so clinical, and they lose their bedside manner because they become detached because it's a trauma response, right? So we have to have some empathy for that. So that's part of being prepared. When I talk to women, this is what you're going to get within a hospital system, right? There's no way around that. Okay, but how can we work within that and mitigate some of these things, right? There's
Yeah.
just, it is what it is, which is why more women are turning to home birth,
Yeah.
because then they don't have to worry about any of that. It's just a whole
Right.
different ball game.
Yeah. Which you definitely prepared me for. And I was so glad the second time to have an advocate. Of course, my husband was there and we did a lot of reading and
Mm-hmm.
had lots of questions and felt very prepared. But when
Mm-hmm.
you come up against a decision, and you
Mm-hmm.
have someone that is, they seem to be an authority and they're
Yeah.
telling you this is what you need to do,
Yeah.
or in my case, kind of, actually, when I retold this to you, you were pretty upset, but scaring me into a decision, right? Like, you're
Right.
gonna tear, so you need this epidural, and I'm like, you're right. Which
Mm-hmm.
I didn't tear. I didn't tear either time, but
Yeah.
um, those fear, just different things that can happen, that it's great to have someone else
Mm-hmm.
there that can really talk you through the actual, like, what's actually happening here,
Right.
what's your choice here. And yeah,
Right.
so again, so important. I cannot, I guess, emphasize this
Mm-hmm.
more, but so important, specifically for Black women,
Yeah.
and to this idea of centering the
Mm-hmm.
Black mother, right? Like, helping to create this space for the birth that you want, which
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to fight for. I don't want
Right.
to seem like it's an aggressive, defensive sort of
Mm-hmm.
experience in the hospital, but something
Mm-hmm.
that you definitely do need to prepare for and understand what
Right.
your options are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it, like you're saying, with that centering, it's being seen. I want you to see me and listen to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think someone asked a question too on what is the role of a midwife and should they be used in the homes because of the virus. Um,
Yeah. Can you explain? I think this is a question that I
I,
had always, like, what's the difference between an OB, a midwife, and a doula?
yeah. So an OB and a midwife are the same, with the exception that a midwife cannot do a C-section. They don't perform surgery. Um, that's the difference. And a doula again isn't doing it. Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
a doula is preparing you for the birth, and just you have, I think of it as like you have your safety net on the side. That's like
Yeah.
just for you during that whole process. Someone that you can always reach out to get you through whatever it is you need to get through.
Yeah. And to kind of put it in context for my two births, my first experience, I used a midwife, and I was told if I needed a C-section or anything surgical, that
Yeah.
I would be sent to the OB team. And actually, with some complications before I actually gave birth, I was
Mm-hmm.
seen by an OB team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I did not have a doula, unfortunately. And then the second time, I was seen by an OB and then had a doula. So they all have their different um, sort of
Right.
roles, even
So
though I
there's a
didn't
little
have a C-section. But go ahead.
there's a difference in, there's a CNM, which is a certified nurse and midwife, and those midwives usually work within a hospital system. And now a
Got it.
CPM is a certified practicing midwife, and they do home births.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of difference in that. A midwife that works within a hospital system may be more um, geared towards natural birth and know what a physiological birth looks like, but they're still going to practice under those hospital parameters, if that makes sense. So you're not
Yeah.
necessarily going to get that, natural approach, because they're still working within a hospital and they still practice kind of the same as an OB. If
Yeah.
that makes sense. Now, sometimes you get, like when I worked at BMC, midwives there were like really like home birth midwives, where they were more hands off and just letting you labor, and they know what your body's doing, so they're not so like preemptive trying to prevent something from happening. They're just sitting back and waiting for birth to happen, where you're not going to get that from an OBGYN, because they
Yeah.
just want things to move along and go forward. But to answer the question about the virus, if you're looking, a midwife is going to be working with an assistant. So you're looking at two people, a risk of two people versus a hospital with hundreds of folks that you're going to be exposed to. So I think I would take that risk with two people versus hundreds of people within a hospital, because hospitals are just a nasty petri dish anyway, right? With if you go within in a hospital, you're at risk for any infection at any time, whether we're dealing with COVID-19 or not. So yeah, I think I would, if I was a great candidate for a home birth and I felt safe birthing at home, I would choose a home birth. But again, it's your choice.
Yeah.
You can't be pressured into a home birth because like that's the it thing now, or because it's safer, or because of all these things. If you don't feel safe, you will have a horrible home birth, because you're going to be holding all of that in, and it's not going to be a great experience. Like, you have to want it for yourself and know that it's your choice, not someone else's choice. But they all wear masks. All of the midwives that I know, they are practicing social distance, and so a lot of their prenatals are virtual, and then they're there for the actual birth. So they are limiting their exposure risk.
Interaction. Yeah. Interesting. So there's two questions that are here. Also, we could talk all night, and maybe we need to create a series. I'm serious. This would be amazing.
Well, listen, I can talk about birth.
I know.
And I've been cooped up in the house forever. Nobody wants to hear about vaginas and breasts and
you have boys, right?
And uteruses in my house. They don't.
So, okay, so I think we're making a series. We're going to figure that one out. Someone asked about a VBAC. And then the other question is, and I'm going to find the VBAC question. And then just a general question that I had, I guess in closing, which I'm having so much fun, I don't want to stop, but how do you find a doula, right? So we can close with that. But the question was, I'm planning a VBAC, and I'm wondering if you have some advice about how to make sure during this COVID issue I don't get pushed into having a C-section.
Okay. To be realistic with you, you're going to be pushed into a repeat cesarean section. So we already had this study called the ARRIVE study that came out, and it said that all women should be induced at 39 weeks because that would limit their risk of all these things. It's a silly study. It makes no sense. So now what I've heard is that they're using that study again to push people into inductions and push women into cesarean sections. So just know going into this that you're going to be highly pressured to get a repeat cesarean section. Some of the language they may use is that it's safer. Like, why, especially with COVID, they're gonna like, well, why risk, right, being here for this long time to labor and exposing yourself more when we can just go right into a C-section and, we're done and over with, right? But it doesn't make sense, because then you're in the hospital for 4 days after your cesarean section. So versus 2 days if you have a vaginal birth. So for you, I would say there's a lot more conversations to be had with your provider, and trying to prepare a VBAC, or it's a TOLAC. It's a trial of labor after cesarean section. So that's what you should be asking for. The VBAC is actually if you ended up having that vaginal birth after a C-section. So lots of in-depth conversations on what is happening with your body to trust that process. And if there's a hiccup in the road, that you don't have to jump into the OR, right? Because that's just what's going to happen. And if you'd like, you can email me and we could talk about it.
Awesome. It also sounds like in general, there's just lots of conversation, probably more so than you might have expected or would have done in the past with your provider. Really make them take the time with you. I know my OB and I, there were some times where I was even like, okay, it's a 5-minute appointment, and other times where I really went in depth and asked her lots of questions, and in a point to kind of let her know where I was coming from already before we got to the day, where I stood on some things and decisions I would potentially want to make. But I guess the last question is, how do you find a doula? I know there's some systems here in Massachusetts set up, but if someone is in a
Yeah.
different state, the person asked about Georgia. Do you
Yeah.
have any advice, maybe specific
There,
organizations, but generally, if you're
um,
somewhere else, how do you find a doula?
so the most popular website is Doula Match. I think it's doulamatch.com or net. And you can find a doula all over the country there. If you're on Facebook and you're looking for a Black doula in particular, there's the Doulas of Color Facebook page. There's New England Doulas of Color if you're looking in this area. But if you pop into any of those groups and join, if you say, "Hey, I'm looking for a doula in whatever state," we're our own network, so we will find someone for you in a different state.
Awesome. And then you're part of, I don't know if you wanted to talk about the agency. I don't know how that works, but here in Massachusetts, the doula agency, is that a thing?
Um,
Lies. Let's just go to your website, the Birth Co. Right?
well, one thing I wanted to say before we leave that's really, really important that um, if you test positive for COVID-19 after you've given birth, they are going to separate you from your baby, probably for a
Hmm.
couple of weeks. This is not evidence-based. It goes against the World Health Organization's recommendations. The CDC, I don't know why they're still recommending separation, but they are. Um, that's going to be another fight on you here because they are not testing, they are doing like symptom checks for everyone that comes within the hospital. So your partner, you all get like a symptom check. If they feel you may be presumptive positive, they may go ahead and test you. And if you do test positive, they're going to separate you from your baby. So be prepared to know that you don't have to be separate from your baby. Right? So that's another one of their policies. But that are things that you need to look out for and radar.
Wow. Are they still allowing breastfeeding or at least giving colostrum?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So you'll
Okay.
still get your skin to skin. You'll still breastfeed. But yeah, if you do test positive, then the recommendation is to separate. Although they don't use that language, they say we are going to separate. It's a policy, blah blah blah. Just know that you have the right to say no. I don't want to be separated from my baby. I want to room in with my baby. I don't want to be my baby off to a nursery or anywhere else. And
Yeah.
also the other thing too I wanted to mention is that if you do decide to birth in a hospital, leave. If after you have your baby and you and
Get
your
out.
baby are medically sound and healthy, go home. Go home. Don't stay.
So you can get discharged before the 2 days, or do you have to stay the
Absolutely.
2 days?
Absolutely.
What?
So you can get discharged before
Wow.
then. So it will be AMA against medical advice. Just sign the
Okay.
sheet, leave. That AMA is to protect the hospital that says, we said it wasn't safe for them, but they wanted to leave anyway. Okay. Bye. Bye.
Yep.
Bye,
Yep.
Felicia.
Oh my
I
God,
have
that's
to go with my baby.
yeah.
Because
That,
again, it's just to lower your risk,
right.
lower the risk for you and your baby. We know that somehow, miraculously, babies have this protective measure. They found no COVID-19 in the placenta, in the baby's lungs. So somehow, even if mom has the disease, baby does not contract it. But that's with inside mom. Now, once baby comes out, baby has the same exposure risk as everyone else. So go
Okay.
home. Go home with your baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
And breastfeed. Breastfeed. I know breastfeeding isn't on everyone's, wish list, but I mean, that's also a protective measure for your baby because it has all the antibodies and all just the wonderful things that your baby needs to protect itself and to help build its
Totally.
immune system.
My favorite is like all of the articles are like breast milk might have antibodies, and it's like, yes. Has anyone like have you read a lactation book?
Right.
It's wild, like the just misinformation or bits of information that
Yeah.
are being provided in the
Yeah.
media. It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as well as delayed cord clamping. Get all that blood into your baby so that your baby can
Yes.
get all of those stem cells and goodness
Stem
from
cells.
that,
Yeah.
all that blood. I mean, it's a whole system that we're disrupting, and um, we need to know not to.
Yes. Okay. So obviously they're here today, but how can people find you if they want to email you to ask you questions, if they want to hire you, if they want to
Sure.
learn more about what you're offering?
So my website is The Birth Co. That's co just.com. And then my email is smith@thebirthco.com. And my
Awesome.
phone number is 857-231-1981. You could text me or whatever.
She's awesome. You text her anything. No, I'm kidding. Pictures of your belly and questions all times of night. I
You
had
can
so
send me
many
what you think is your
questions.
mucus plug, and hey, is this the
Yeah.
mucus plug? I
Yes, I love it. So thank you everybody who is here tonight. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you
I'm so
guys hung
excited
in
about,
there for a good while.
right? I was like 15 minutes. I should have known. I am my mother's daughter. 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yeah, well, when we start to talk and forget it. Hey.
I know. So we're going to do this again, definitely.
Okay.
We have to make this something. If you have questions, please reach out to us, anyone who's here. And please join me for the rest of the week. I have other guests that will be exciting to help celebrate Black Maternal Health Week. And again, Chatara, thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome.
Awesome. Well, have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.